Hey everybody! Welcome to the Good Evening Kitties podcast, a Tales from the Crypt review. My name is Melissa, your ghostess with the mostest, and today's episode is Season 2, Episode 5, Three's a Crowd. This episode is not one of my favorites. It's okay, it's just I feel like a lot of it could have been prevented, and it's not really something that... I mean, I know it's a show, but it's not really something that would really happen, I don't think. She wasn't they weren't very supportive of each other, but of course, Tales from the Crypt likes to have a lot of marital discord in their episodes, and this one is no exception. So, we're going to go ahead and get started here on this episode. Like I said, Season 2, Episode 5, Three's a Crowd. This episode aired on May 1st, 1990. It stars Gavin O'Herlihy. You'll know him as Eric from Willow. I like that movie a lot, so I noticed him. And The Descent Part 2. Also stars Ruth DeSosa. She was in Hook, and among other things, and Paul Lieber, who was in King of California. This episode is directed by David Burton Morris, who also directed Jersey Girl. As always, John Kassir is the voice of the Cryptkeeper, and Danny Elfman does the theme song. The screenplay for this one is Kim Kettleson and Annie Willett and David Burton Morris. I'm going to go ahead and read the description here. Holy deadlock. A hubby turns against his wife and her presumed suitor. But is it all a fatal mistake? I don't know if that really sums it up, but let's go ahead here. Alright, so this episode opens up with, he's kind of like, in a way, doing his own little podcast or own little radio show. He's got a record player and headphones and a little mic on, and he does this, lots of puns. I'll play one of them later. It's a pretty good one. He goes all out for this pun. So he's basically, opening up the show for this one, for Three's a Crowd. And it starts out, the characters are Richard, Alan, who is and Ella, and Richard is the husband of Ella, and Alan is their friend, and he was also the best man at their wedding. So it kind of starts out like that. So it starts out, Richard's not in a great place. He's a bit of an alcoholic. He was waiting around at his house. It looks like he's sitting in front of a dinner that didn't get eaten, and it's their anniversary. And he's sitting there with champagne, and it looks like he was trying to make it nice for her. There's a nice table setting and candles, and he's just sitting there in the dark now, and she's not there, and he's just been drinking his troubles away, so he is not in the best mindset when she shows up. So she comes home, and she's been gone for practically 4 hours with Alan, who again is their friend and was the best man at their wedding. And Richard is not in a good state about that, and she comes home, and they live in, it looks like a fairly fancy place. She comes home, and she's modeling like this new coat that she has on, and he's like, "Where'd you get that?" And she's like, "Oh, Alan got it for me as a gift." And he's just like, he plays it really well. Richard, the guy who plays Richard, plays it really well on being paranoid and upset.
4 hours? Where have you been?
Shopping, just like I told you. And Alan insisted on buying me this new coat. What do you think?
You said you'd be 1 hour. 2 at the most.
And he's like, said you were only going to be gone like an hour or 2 tops, and it's been 4 hours, and it's our anniversary. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be super upset." And he's like, "Well, no, I'm not upset. I'm sure you guys had a good time." But, he's just like, whatever. And so she heads back, and she's, he's basically saying that, why have we seen him so much lately? We haven't seen him in a long time. He's like, he was the best man in our wedding, but, oh, her name is Della. Okay. Yeah, I kept thinking it was Ella, the way he said it. But no, it's Della. Okay. So he's pouring himself another drink, and she's like, "Richard, just don't do this, please." And he's like, "Girl, let me have my drink." And she's like, "It's our anniversary." And he's like, "Yeah, I know." He's like, "I've been waiting. I'm here by myself." So they get in a huge fight, about her spending so much time with Alan. And she's like, "I don't know why you're so paranoid. He's just an old friend who wants to see us happy and things like that. I don't know why you're so upset." And he's very jealous of Alan. Basically what she's saying is they're getting ready to go on a trip that Alan is giving them. It's an anniversary present to them, but he goes with them. So it's kind of weird. Like, Alan goes out there with them. They stay in separate cabins, but I mean, like, they basically get on like this huge boat, and they go over, and then they drive this nice car. Like, he's got pretty good money, and he wanted to give them a gift. I think it's their 10-year anniversary. And Richard's just not in a great sense about that. But you find out later, he recently lost his job selling insurance, and now is just working, I think, at a coffee shop or something like that. So, so he's feeling pretty down on himself. He's not able to support his wife, and it feels like they're falling apart. And he gets to a drinking point to where he's pretty upset. And she's holding him and he's kind of tearing up a little bit. And he, besides not being able to financially support her right now, he also can't give her a baby, he says. So I guess they've been trying for, 10 years or whatever, and they can't seem to get pregnant. And he just feels like, less of a man for all this stuff. And she's just, she's consoling him. But then the phone rings and she answers it and it's Alan. And I'm like, why are you answering the phone? Like, this episode kind of irritated me because, like, you can tell, like, she told Alan to call for some reason. I don't know. And he's like, please just let it ring. And so she picks it up. And I'm like, really? Come on. Like, you can tell he's really upset. Like, he was tearing up and he just wants to hang out with her for their anniversary. And, and he's drunk. And so then he's just really irritated. And so she answers the phone and he kind of walks out of the room and he's just really bewildered. And when she answers the phone, she goes, yeah, I know it would be you. And she goes, no, I didn't tell him yet. It wouldn't be the right time. And he heard that and he's like, what do you mean tell him what? It's like all this secret around him for some reason. And again, by the end, it irritates me, and I'll explain it later. Like, there's all this secrecy around him, and it's like, no wonder he's so paranoid. So they go out to the cabin, and, while they're driving, it seems like, Alan is being a little flirty. I mean, he's kind of like squeezing her leg and making jokes about, like, you got to her before I did kind of thing. And it's like, he's already in a sensitive state. This is supposed to be your friend. It just seems like he's being a little flirty than you should.
I've always regretted never trying harder to steal Della away from you. Just kidding, Richie. Come on, you know that.
And so they get out to the cabin, and it's really nice. It's a real big cabin, a lot of wood trim and wood. It's really nice. And again, they're staying in separate cabins. And so then there's a guy too, that like a housekeeper guy, and he helps them in with their bags. And so Alan asks him if his packages came in, and he said yes, they did. They arrived this morning, and they're like good, and it just seems like he tells her that they're all set. So yeah, so he says the packages are all in. They got some food, supplies, booze, drugs, and I'm like, shoot, okay, they're gonna get crazy, And so it still seems like it's, I can see why he'd be paranoid because it does seem like hush hush. He's kind of like, hey girl, like kind of winking at Della like we're all good to go and everything. And so, they make themselves comfy at the cabin. And then it cuts later to, they're all hanging out in one of the cabins, I guess either his or I don't know. And they're all kind of like, Richard's over there drinking by the fire. And then Alan and Della are over playing cards and talking about old times, like things. And I guess they knew each other in high school or college. And so talking about that. And the more that they laugh, Richard just looks like he's getting more and more pissed. And he's just, he's just not in a good way right now. And so he heads out to get some air. And he runs into the caretaker. And, they kind of have a talk and they exchange words. And, they're kind of they exchange some drinks. And
you are a lucky man. You have very beautiful wife. To be married that long is hard thing. I know. I tried 3 times.
So he goes back and he goes to sleep. And he hears some noises outside and he ends up waking up. It's kind of a windy night. And he heads outside his room in the cabin, and I guess Alan's over there for some reason. And they're kind of like, Alan and Della are out like on a porch and the door's open. And they're just kind of talking, sitting on the couches. And it's basically like a conversation of like, are you sure you want to do this? I never knew I could feel so happy. All these things that are kind of trivial where you're like, what? And they're kind of just being really kind of secretive, and he kind of touches her leg. And this whole time Richard's watching and he's just like, what is happening? Like he's so upset looking. He's just like, what are they talking about? And then he hears Della say to Alan, it's just been so hard not telling him. It'll all be over tomorrow. He'll know. And so now he's like, he looks super sad now. He's like, no, what is happening? What is going on? And so they end up, it's getting cold. So they're like, okay, well, let's go inside. And he's like, Alan is being kind of flirty. So Richard like sneaks back into his room. And so she comes back upstairs and she snuggles into bed with him. And I kind of noticed the part here, she kind of is like, oh, are you awake? And he's acting like he's not, he's just kind of sleeping. And she kind of gets into bed, and when she kind of puts her arm around him, they definitely do like, I noticed a good shot of like her wedding ring, which I thought was kind of cool. Like she laid down, when she put her arm over it, really that was kind of what stuck out to me. So it's kind of like a thing about, fidelity and things like that. So she has her ring there. And he just looks really distant. So he wakes up the next morning and he's going to get dressed, and like she's not there. She's gone, and it looks like, I guess, she went out with Alan. And he's like, what? And so he's notices that she has like a new present like in one of her drawers, and it's got a heart on it, and when he opens it up, it's like lingerie. And he's like, what? Like, Alan got her some lingerie? Like, he's like, he just can't believe. He's like, what do you mean lingerie? And he's so mad. And he takes one of the stockings and, like, puts it in his pocket. And he just goes downstairs to drink all the drinks. Now he's ready to just get blitzed. I think it's probably like 9 a.m. And he's, nope, got to keep this going. And so he heads down to go drink all the drinks. And he sees that the caretaker guy is down there. And he's like, have you seen them? And, he's like, well, yeah, but they asked me to watch over you. They left for this morning. And so he's saying he wants to go to the other cabin, and the caretaker's like, no, but you can't go to the other cabin. They asked me to keep you out. So they're like even getting this guy in on it. And he's just like, what do you mean I can't go over there? You're in on this too, And he's just, great, you're in on this too. Everyone's in on this against me. And the caretaker's like, please, I'm just doing my job. And they're like, how much did you pay you to do this job? And so then, just as things are starting to get heated, Alan and Della walk back in, and they're like, oh, Richard, you're up, cool. We've been waiting for you. And the caretaker comes over to Alan and is like, I can't do this anymore. This guy's crazy. Please, leave me out of this. Alan's like, okay. And so he says to them, he goes, well, where were you guys? Like, Richard says, where were you guys? And were you out shopping? And they're like, no, you weren't up yet, so we thought we'd take a walk. And he's like, okay. And he's already pouring like a drink. And she's like, don't start already. Don't get crazy. And this is kind of where Alan finds out that Richard doesn't have his job anymore. Oh, that's right. He's bartending. Because Della never told him that they lost their job. He's like, oh, you're kidding. I didn't know that you lost your job or whatever. Alan's like, why didn't you tell me, Della? And then she's like, well, I didn't tell Alan because I knew it was only temporary. So, I mean, that does seem a little weird that she wouldn't tell him. It makes maybe a little bit of sense later, which I'll get into, but... And so he drinks all the drinks. They end up getting in a little fight, and she storms off and leaves him and Alan there. Alan goes after her. And Richard's still there, like, in his pants and just nothing else, running around, and he's just mad. And so he goes, but he's like, you know what? Fine, I'm going to get so blitzed. And then it's nighttime. They're gone all day. And then Alan comes back to get him. And he's kind of looking for him in the house. He's like, Richard, calling out. And it's super dark in there. And Richard meets him up at the top. Like, Richard's waiting for him at the top of the stairs. And he looks pretty rough. He's got a shirt on now, but he's still looking pretty rough. And he's like, hey. And Alan's like, hey, come on, Della's waiting. We have a surprise for you. And he's like, great, I love surprises. And he's like, where are we going? And Alan's like, my cabin, come on, it'll be fun. And he's like, wait a second. And he pulls out this crossbow that he took off the wall, because it's like a hunting cabin. And he's like, I've been practicing all day. And then you look over, and like one of the taxidermied deer on the side has all these arrows in him. And like he's been practicing drunkenly with this like wooden crossbow. And he points it at Alan, and Alan's like, what are you doing? Why, he kind of thinks like a joke, he's like, come on, put that down, stupid, it's loaded, Richard's like, well, I was thinking of using it on you, and he's like, oh, come on, like, again, he thinks it's a joke, it's his friend, and Alan's like, come on, man, it's not funny, let's go, come on, we got a surprise for you. And so then he starts making these really, crass comments about Della, and how it's like to be with her, intimately, and apparently, I guess it looks like maybe her and Alan were together, like, over 10 years ago, and it didn't work out. So there's always been some, like, maybe he didn't know they were together a long time ago. I don't know. But he gets pretty, a little dirty about all this stuff and rubbing it in about them having sex and sleeping together, and about them cheating on him. And he's like, what are you talking, Alan's like, what are you talking about? He's like, come on, this isn't funny. And he kind of backs him up into a wall, and he shoots the arrow and hits Alan, like, just under the heart, and kind of sticks him up against the wall there.
Another tour for your wall, amigo.
And so, Richard's laughing. About what he's doing. He's really lost it. And so now, Della's coming over, like, where are you guys at? Come on, And so she walks in, like, looking for them, like, come on, you said you were going to go get them. And she walks in, and can't find Alan, she can't find Richard, and the door behind her shuts. And it's Richard, and he's in like her white coat that Alan got her. And he's like starts modeling it all creepy like and everything, like swirling around in it and everything. And he is gone now. And she's like, oh my gosh, you scared me, and what are you doing? Where's Alan? And you can tell he's got like some blood on the coat, and she's like, well, where's Alan? And he's like, he's hanging around here somewhere. And that's where he kind of looks up, and there's Alan mounted on the wall like a taxidermied animal, and he's dead. He's still got the arrow in it, and Della has a great scream here.
He's hanging around here somewhere. Happy anniversary, baby.
And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. And so she's screaming, and she's like, how could you? And he's got this really great distant stare. And so she runs upstairs to get away from him, and she runs upstairs and locks herself in the room, and he's kind of like, I don't know, licking blood off his hand or something. I don't know. And she puts like a dresser in front of the door, and she's trying to get away from him. And so she ends up, like, he's coming through the door. He's chopping the door down kind of thing. And so she runs and jumps out the window of the second story and lands and takes off running, and he meets her downstairs. And so he, like, chases after her. Like, I was like, dang, girl. Like, I mean, she really jumped. She jumped pretty hard. And so he's got that stocking still that from that lingerie set. And so he meets her outside, and he's chasing her down with the stocking, and he puts it around her neck and starts choking her with the stocking. And so he ends up choking her to death right outside the porch. She's got blood on her from jumping through the window. He's got blood on him. Now, I don't know why he takes her body and he starts dragging it to the other cabin. I don't know why. I'm not sure why he didn't just stay there, which just doesn't really make sense to me. Like, why wouldn't you just stay at your place? And why wouldn't you pick her up? She's not super, like, heavy. But he drags her across this little bridge over this lake all the way to the other cabin on the other side, which these cabins are huge, and all the way to the other cabin. I don't know if he was going to try to frame Alan. I don't know how that would work because he was shot in the heart and put up on a wall, unless he was going to take him back down. I don't know. And he goes into Alan's cabin, and when he opens the door, it's full of people, and it's a surprise party. It was a surprise party that he was going to be a dad. So, Della's pregnant, and his face is his face, and everything is just crazy. Like, all these happy people, and it says, happy anniversary, Richard, you're going to be a daddy. And it's like all these people, and even the groundskeeper guy's there, and they all got toys and things for the baby. And he's just dragging her bloody body in with the coat on. And his face is just like, wait, what? And then they're like, where's Della? She's missing this. And that's when everyone looks down. It's pretty morbid. They look down, and there she is, dead and hooked onto the stocking. He's realized he's made a horrible mistake. And then that's the end of the episode. And that irritates me. Because, like, I don't know. That episode, it's not... I feel like this could have been prevented a lot. For one, that could be one reason why Della maybe didn't tell Alan that Richard didn't have a job, because I think Alan might have been fronting some of this trip, especially like with the party maybe, and maybe she didn't want Alan to think that Richard couldn't have afforded it if he didn't want to. Because basically, like, he had kind of brought that up when he mentioned about not being able to work at the insurance place anymore, that, had it been just up to him, their anniversary would have been like some cheap motel and then getting a dinner and just hanging out together and stuff. But really, that dinner he had at their place or whatever seemed nice. But, I don't know, maybe Alan fronted that place too. I don't know. I think he was helping her out a little monetarily, and I think that really irritated Richard. And I feel like Della should have maybe told Alan about Richard's situation. Maybe he wouldn't have been so generous, to not, to maybe not rub it in. Kind of. I feel like it just irritates me, because a lot of this could have been prevented. How was it that hard to tell him that you're pregnant? And second, he has a drinking problem a little bit, so maybe you shouldn't have gotten I don't know, or maybe you should have worked on that first. But in the beginning, he was like practically crying and sad about not being able to give her a baby. That would have been the perfect time right there. And I don't know why Alan would even call anyway that night. It just all doesn't make sense. I could see why he would be upset and paranoid about it. They were being flirty, and it was just a really weird situation where I was like, how can you not just say, hey, we're pregnant? Or, surprise, we're pregnant? Or, why take them to this whole other place to have a party over this when you know he's struggling so hard with everything? Why wouldn't you just tell him? And that's what irritates me, is because none of this would have happened if they would have just told him. It wasn't even going to be that great of a surprise. It was like 10 people there. It wasn't even like it was like, come on, you could have just told him, you know? And so that just irritated me. So this one's not one of my favorites. I mean, it was acted well by the guy who played Richard, and it was, you know, it had its fun moments, but it's just like, when you find out what it is, which I kind of figured what it was halfway through anyway. I mean, I've seen this episode a long time ago, but there was one point when they were, Alan and Della were sitting out on the porch, and Alan made a remark of like, well, this is where one life ends and another begins. And right away I was like, okay, well, she's probably pregnant is what it is. But even when he was like accusing them of sleeping together before he shot him, why wouldn't you say, we're not sleeping together? Why wouldn't you just be like, no, dude, seriously? Or like, he's pointing an arrow at you. I would have maybe even been like, no, seriously, there's a party next door for you. Like, seriously, you're just being paranoid. We were just trying to plan something around your back. Just act like you're surprised. Please don't shoot me. Like, why? Ugh, that one just really irritates me. So, yeah, so that was season 2, episode 5, Three's a Crowd. And then it cuts to the Cryptkeeper having like a little party at the end with some balloons and a little hat. Cryptkeeper, you're so punny. So the best Cryptkeeper pun is...
Tonight, I've chosen a fiendish little tale from my hold of moldy oldies. We've been invited to an anniversary celebration of holy deadlock. You know, to love and to perish, for richer, for horror, in sickness and in stealth, till death do us part.
He really went all out on that one. There was quite a few puns in that one. Moldy oldies, holy deadlock, etc., etc. This was a good pun. So even though the episode wasn't my super favorite, this is a whole good series of puns by the Cryptkeeper. There is a little bit of trivia here from IMDb. The title of the episode, Three's a Crowd, is from the common proverb, two's company, but three's a crowd, which most people know. But this was kind of interesting. This episode, the cabin scenes were filmed in the same cabin that John Candy and Dan Aykroyd's family stay in the movie The Great Outdoors. So that's kind of neat if you've seen that movie. So next episode will be season 2, episode 6, The Thing from the Grave. So again, thanks for listening to the Good Evening Kitties podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, like, share, email, any of that. And again, thanks for listening.
I just had quite a scare. I actually thought my heart was beating.